I think a person learns wisdom by being quiet and not jumping right into their story too, not pushing their story back. And it makes life easier. An experience I had in India.
Okay.
Um, a friend of mine, when I lived in Germany, we were in a meditation group and we decided to go to India to the ashram. And we got into Bombay and we didn't have visas. We were told we didn't need visas. We got into Bombay, I don't know, it was about 11 o'clock at night. And the airport was filled, or at least the reception room was filled where they received us, and then we had to go through doors into the other place. And it was filled, there were long, long lines, and the planes come in sort of all at once, and then there's thousands of people, it seems like, and then there's nothing. Then it's this huge place is empty. So we got in and we waited in line, and there were about 3 or 4 people in front of us, young people, guys. And they didn't have visas. They were from America and they didn't have visas. They were so mad. They were Americans. And well, we weren't going to get heated like that because we're not guys. And this was a little Indian, not much taller than me. And he says, no, 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 visas, visas. They didn't have visas. He said, no, no, visas, visas. And they got so furious. They were so mad. And they were, you know, and he said, no, no, visas, visas. And they were really angry. And they were nasty and blah, blah, blah. And so he, in the end, wound up giving them 2 days to be in Bombay, but no place else, and then leave back to America. And Elisa and I, my girlfriend, we were looking at each other and saying, we don't have visas. What's going to happen? So we got up there and we said, we're so sorry, we don't have visas. We were told we didn't need visas. We're going to Swami Muktananda's ashram. It's very near. It's only about an hour away. That's where we'll be the whole time. We really apologize. He said, no visas, no visas? I said, no, we're so sorry. And he said, you go over there. And there was a big wall, a few yards away, and there were some chairs. So I said, you sit. So we sat. So it cleared out. Everything was empty. And we sat there, and we sat there. So we sat, and we just finally said, well, we don't know what's happening, so we just kind of gave in, and we just let it be what it was. And finally it cleared out again, and he said, no, you come. So we didn't know what was happening. So he took us in another big room, and there was a whole row of offices, and he said, you stay. And we didn't know what was going. So he left, and he went into one of these offices. And a guard came up and was telling us, what are you doing? What's going on? All this stuff. And we said, and suddenly he came out of the office, and he said, go, you stay. These are my people. And he said, he gave us each a little ticket. I don't know what that was for. And he said, you go out the door. You go. We went out the door. We got our baggage. We got into an old taxi which had no floorboards, and we got taken to the ashram. And we learned to let things be. Just when you're in a situation that you can't conceive of, you don't know what's happening. If you can't do anything at the moment, just let it be. Just let what's going on go on. There's nothing you can do. And relax, and somehow things work out. They really do. And I've had that experience all my life.
This is when my life really changed.
I had a young man who was helping me, and I was showing him how to cut the trim boards to put on top of the roof. Now you could buy them. You don't have to cut them. Had an old chains table saw up on the roof, on a cradle there, and the house was overlooking the Ballard Locks. And as you know, it rained so hard there that the roof was wet, and I slipped and fell and threw my hand on that saw, and that certainly changed my life entirely. And as you can see, the fingers, I can only bend them right here. I cut them all off. I gathered them up, and the surgeon from the hospital, happened to be in the Ballard Hospital at that time, sewed them on. And so I looked down, I saw those fingers were still there, but they're stiff. I can't bend them anyway, just right here at the knuckle. And I was so despondent. I said, how am I going to support my family? I can't type, I can't play the piano. I could play the piano at that time. And after about 3 days, I prayed to God and I said, God, if you'll see me through this, I'll serve you the rest of my life. And this is kind of hard to say. At that instance, I felt that I was touched by the Holy Spirit, and I woke up and I said, I can do it. And Willis at that time, my brother Willis, that had the rest home, nursing home, he said to me, he says, the state is getting into my business and I don't know how to handle it. Why don't you join me? You're an accountant, you understand the books, and the Medicare and Medicaid hadn't started yet, but the health department was looking at us pretty hard. And so I joined Willis, and we built the first nursing home with wide halls, wide doors, the first one that built in the state of Washington with those abilities. So that's how I got in the nursing home business, through a tragedy. And I didn't know fingers could bleed so much. My gosh, I about bled to death before I got to the hospital. I think after I'd made that promise to God that I would serve Him, of course, my lifestyle at that time was very good. I wasn't a bad guy. I never drank or smoked or anything like that. But I think my attitude was a little calmer and more reserved a bit. But after getting into the business, I could see what good it was doing, and how people responded to love and consideration and care and good food, and that part, of course, always increased and still does today. I live at Colonial Vista in the penthouse there, and I have a lifetime estate there, but I promised the ladies there, I'm going to live to be 105 to keep track of you all. So they kind of chuckled. Some of the 103-year-old ladies that are up there are still alive and active, and it's just makes your heart feel good that you're caring for those people. And so that's my philosophy today.
If you are genuinely interested in people, you have an eye contact with people, and pretty soon there's something they'll mention, or you will mention, that shows they have an interest in it, and you can maybe ask them something about that, and then they will expound, and pretty soon, you know what it really is? It means looking people in the eye and letting them know that you care and you're interested in them, and they're going to tell you something, and perhaps you've opened a whole new avenue of knowledge that they can share with you, and it's just a matter of looking people in the eye and saying, "How are you?" and then listening. You need to listen. If I could add something to a curriculum, to a school program, I would include a class in listening, not just to the words people are saying, but what are they telling you really deeply? It's the way you have to listen to your children when you have children, the way you have to listen to anyone with an interest. When you show people that you're interested in them, they do respond well to you. My husband being very active, he was asked to run for the state legislature. He served in the state legislature for, I think, 6 terms, about that. And that was a very interesting experience. You go knocking on doors and saying, I'm supporting so-and-so. And I think it would be really good. Here's some information. And he's asking for your vote. Well, that's really a one-on-one again, you know. Oh, there have been a lot of surprises. Generally. Well, actually, one of the surprises was that through all of this, and while I found it very interesting to have that short bit of political and governmental introduction to see how government did indeed work. The sad part was that the marriage then failed, and that leaves you with a whole nother situation where you're then dependent upon yourself finding what it is you would like to do to support yourself, finding out that it doesn't matter if people judge you or you know the truth, you move on, and while it was a very painful experience, I remember making a conscious decision at that time that my children and my grandchildren, I'm interested in their lives, and I'm never going to put them in a situation where they have to say, well, I'd like to have Mom here for the graduation, but if she's here, Dad won't come. Or I'd like to have Dad here, but if he's here, Mom won't come. Well, what a terrible thing for your children to have to decide. Well, they're painful areas. You learn from pain too. You learn from the heartbreaks. And I don't think any of us have too many scars. Through all of this, my faith has helped. My faith in God has been a big help. I'm not somebody that goes out recruiting, but I do know that my faith in God gives me a real inner peace. I don't spend a lot of time thinking, what if I had done this? What if I'd done that? That's just not something that's productive.
I was raised by my mom initially by herself because my father was on a warship in sailing from Scotland to Murmansk during World War II. So when he came back into our home, which I think I was ruling at that point, the tables kind of turned, and it was very different. And we had a stormy relationship, to say the least, but there was a lot of good that came out of that, for sure. But my mom had been extremely lenient, and my father was very authoritarian. and I learned to get around it. I pretty much had a pretty lenient beginning to my life with my mom. I mean, I was pretty spoiled. Um, it was really good for me, and I learned to, to really get into that and to make the most of it. There was one part of his teaching that was hard for me, and it was classical music. When he would put on some classical music, I would get extremely, like, afraid. And I'm actually, the musician right now is not coming to my mind. Wagner. There you go. And his music just had this feeling like something very, very horrible was going to happen to me in my life. But I learned that I could control it, because I thought that it was kind of mean that he would play it when he knew that I didn't like it. But I came around to being able to, work through that myself. So I was preparing something for a publication to see if it would get into an anthology. It was from a high school, and they just chose a certain amount of poetry. And he saw it, and he said, "This needs to be changed, and this needs to be changed." And I didn't want to do that, of course. But, I did it. And the poem got accepted. And he said, "See?" And so I stopped showing him my poetry after that. And they still got accepted. So, but it was very hard. But I think he did have an interest, but the way we saw things was such a different worldview that, yeah, he wasn't kind of getting what I was saying, and I totally wasn't getting what he was saying. I mean, he had just come up, he had come from a very wealthy family that got torn apart, and that's probably why he was against my divorce. He ended up in a Catholic orphanage, and ended up running away from his last foster family and living on his own at the age of 14, and really, supporting himself. But he also managed to get his, they didn't call it a GED then, but he got his GED. He put himself through college. He graduated from college, summa cum laude, all while he was working, supporting himself on his own. And then he got married, and then he went into World War II, and so his worldview was extremely different than mine. And so I understand that we would see things differently. But I think that, yeah, it took me a long time to understand him. So what I was asking from him, I was also having a hard time doing for him. I was asking of him to understand me. When I was in high school, from the time I could read, I read a lot. But there was one book in particular that I read when I was in high school that had a lot to do with the way I wanted to bring up my children. And that I would have the wisdom then to know that that's what I wanted is because I didn't have it. And so I read The Prophet by Khalil Gibran, and there's a section in there that he talks about raising children, and that they're not yours, that they are their own souls and their own people, and their opinions are not your opinions, and you can listen to them, you can be an example, but you need to listen to them, and they, as much, if not more, than they listen to you, so that you know who they are. And that's how I brought my children up. And it's because that's what I wanted. And when I read that book, I think I really started feeling good about life, because I saw a different way of being in the world than what I was used to. This was a gentle way, and it wasn't just about being cerebral, because my dad was. I mean, he was a brilliant man, but Kahil Gibran, he really expressed what it was to be human and how we are to be in the world. And it made a tremendous amount of sense to me. And to this day, I have the book right here. I reread it, and it means so much to me. Every time I read it, there's some gem that I take from it that I've forgotten or missed, or it just pertains to my life more at this point. So it becomes, I call that book my counselor. I mean, that's how I felt about it, that the prophet was my counselor.